Okay, so I'm going to be doing a series of 3 videos. This is one of 3, and we're going to be showing you how to make a hand. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to take a life cast of a hand. I've got my model Chris here. In the second video, I'm going to be showing you how to run the different products into the mould, and then in the third video, I'm going to show you some different finishing techniques as well, how to create something that's realistic, but also something that's a little bit more kind of character-based as well. So to start off with, I'm just going to get Chris to put some petroleum jelly onto his hand, just to make the release nice and easy. So while Chris is doing that, I'm going to mix up the silicone that we're using. So we're using Cast, which is a life casting silicone. I've got part A and part B, and you need to mix up equal parts of those products. I've got my scales here to weigh it out, and I'm also going to label up my spatulas part A and B so I don't get them mixed up. I don't want to be contaminating either of these parts because then it will cure within the tubs. The great thing with the Cast is that your A and Bs are different colours. So to start off with, I'm going to mix up my A. So I'm just going to change my gloves because I've got part A on, and I don't want to be having any A on my gloves when I'm going into part B. So I've just measured out my part A, and now I'm just going to measure out my part B. So I want equal parts. So now I've got equal parts of my A and B silicone in my tub. I'm just going to mix those up. So you've got part A, which is a bit more of a pinky colour, and part B is a blue. And as you're mixing it up, you'll be able, it's nice and easy because you can see that it's, once your colours are mixed in, that the products mixed properly together. So once both parts are mixed together, that's what we have. So now I'm just going to apply this onto Chris's skin, and I want a nice even coat to make sure we capture all the detail. You work it like that, Chris, is it comfy? I've put some couch roll down just because it is going to drip and I don't want to make too much of a mess and have a big clean up afterwards. So if you've got some either plastic or cling film or couch roll, you can just pop that down and it makes it easier to clean up. The first coat, you want to be focusing on just making sure that you haven't got any air bubbles in there, because you want to make sure you capture all the detail on the hand. That's the biggest focus of your first coat. With silicone, the silicone's temperature dependent, so if you've got a warmer room or a warmer model to work on from their body temperature, then it's going to cure quicker. Whereas if you're in a colder room or a colder environment, or your model's maybe got cold hands, then it's going to take longer to cure. You can, if they have got really cold hands, you can maybe get them to run them under some hot water to start off with. Same as if your model's really warm, they can run it under cold water. Or you can even, once you've applied the silicone, use a hairdryer just to speed up that curing process as well. Just always make sure that your model's comfortable and you're not keep checking that the heat isn't burning them. Okay, so now we're fully covered. We've got no air bubbles. We've covered all the area of the hand. We just need to wait for the silicone to cure now, roughly about 10 to 15 minutes, again, depending on body temperature and room temperature, just for the product to cure before we add our next layer. So we're cured now, so now I'm going to mix up another batch of equal parts of the A and the B Gur cast, and we're going to add another layer. So again, I've labelled up my spatulas with A and B. I've got my scales out and my pot to mix in. So I'm roughly using 100 grams of A and 100 grams of B as well, so we've got a 200 gram mix. So always make sure you just clean off any excess from your tubs as well before you put the lids on. So I'm just making sure I've cleaned my hands as well before I decant the B. And then I'm just going to repeat as before, and I'm just going to mix up the A and the B back together again. And make sure you get round all the sides and into the bottom as well, so it's mixed thoroughly. So on this layer, what we're going to try and do, at the moment we've almost got a glove going on because all our fingers are separate. We're going to be looking at creating more of a mitten now, so we're going to have the thumb separate to where the four fingers are, and we're going to mould them together. So once I've applied this layer, you can usually apply 2 to 3 layers depending on the thickness that you've got. I think we might actually be okay with just these 2 layers today. It's covering quite nicely. But the silicone, when just on its own, is quite flexible. So it means when we fill the mould with a product, it might distort and you might get some funny shapes on the hand and fingers. So what we're going to add to this is we're going to create a Modrock shell around it, just using plaster bandages. And what that'll do is that'll reinforce the mould, and it'll mean it's nice and sturdy when we come to filling the mould with the products that we're going to run it in. And so we've got our second coat on there. We've gone from having almost like a glove to now wearing a mitten, which will make it a lot easier for adding that Modrock shell, because we're not going to have to go around all the fingers individually. So I'm just going to smooth around the mould. Okay, now we're just going to wait for that to cure before we move on to the next step. So I'm going to be using some Modrock, which is a plaster bandage. It's quite dusty, so I'm going to be wearing a dust mask just as PPE to protect myself. So I've got my Modrock. I'm just going to fold it in half and then dip it into the water. And it wants to be nice and creamy, so I'm just going to massage the water into the plaster to activate it. As you see, you get that nice creaminess. And then I'm just going to apply it I'm going to do half of the hand to start off with. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up a ridge around here. And then I'm going to apply some petroleum jelly as a release agent, and then I'm going to do the other side. So I'm doing about 4 layers with the Modrock. I'm folding each layer over as I do it, so I'm putting 2 down at a time. And then I'm just going to make my ridge now. So I'm going to take some larger pieces of mod rock and I'm going to fold these into 4. And I'm going to make a ridge around the edge of my plaster mod rock, just so it'll help the 2 parts of the mould hold together. So I'm just going to make sure all that's massaged in. And it's all nice and smooth. And then all we need to do is just wait for the mod rock shell to dry and set, and it'll be nice and hard. It will warm up a little bit as it's setting, so just let your model know that. But it won't get hot. There'll just feel a little bit of a heat as that plaster sets. So we're just going to wait for that side to dry before we move on to the other side. Okay, so mod rock shell's nice and hard now. What we're going to do is we're going to turn the hand over, and I'm just going to apply a layer of petroleum jelly to the ledge that I created, just to stop the next half of the mould sticking to itself. So the petroleum jelly is going to act as a mould release. So I've got that second part of the mould on now. We just need to wait for that to set and then we'll remove it. So the mould's all hard now, and all Chris is going to do is just have a little wiggle of his fingers inside. Let me see if I can get it out. And there we go. And that's our mould. So what we can do is we can take these mod rock parts, separate these mod rock parts, because it's got petroleum jelly on, they'll come apart nice and easy. And then we have our silicone mould inside. And what we're going to do in the next video, video number 2, is we're actually going to be filling this mould, and we're going to be making a hand. Okay, so just a reminder to always make sure that you clean your area down, you wipe down all your products after use. And just bear in mind, I've got now a bowl of water with some plaster in. Do not tip this down the sink. What you need to do is you need to wait for the plaster to settle. You can scoop up the top of the water and dispose of it, and then you just need to take some tissue and wipe out the plaster that's in there and put it in the bin.